Lonely Heiress, 70, discovers surprising friendship when Nanny's 12-year-old son sits by her side. Eleanor Devlin felt like a ghost haunting her own mansion. With each creaking floorboard and whisper of the wind, memories of laughter and love showered over her like autumn leaves released from their branches. Seated on one of the many opulent chairs in her grand, empty sitting room, she glanced around, perfectly aware of the valuable art that adorned her walls, but unable to see beyond the frames that trapped her heart. She was an heiress, revered in her affluent neighborhood, but within the community, she had become a mere spectre, the cold, distant, rich lady. The irony twisted deep in her gut like a poisoned vine, doubly harsh as she clutched the silence surrounding her, heavier than any diamond in her estate. When Maria, her new nanny, brought her son Alex, surprise mingled with indignation. Eleanor had wanted nothing more than solitude, yet here he was, a whirlwind of life crashing into her still waters. Young, bright-eyed, and full of whimsical dreams, he seemed to shine a light on the corners of her darkness, a light she resented. In a space meant for cherished memories with her husband, this boy's innocence set her on edge, sometimes forcing her to avert her gaze from the shadow of the past. Before long, the rain began to fall, its rhythmic patter filling the vast hall with melancholy beauty. She wished for quietness, but instead was summoned by curious laughter that broke through her defenses. Alex had stumbled into her art studio, a sacred space she'd shunned for years. As he peeked at her old canvases, Eleanor fought a rising tide of irritation mixed with curiosity. What right did he have to intrude on the domains of her despair? Yet as he spoke of wanting to paint, of feeling invisible at school but longing to make his mark, Eleanor felt her resolve waver. She felt herself crack beneath the weight of nostalgia and regret, forced to confront her own unrealized ambitions. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications, so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As they talked, Eleanor's heart waged war with itself. The innocent passion emanating from Alex was infectious, awakening a glimmer of creativity she thought lost to the void. But just as quickly, waves of self-doubt surged, drowning her resolve to step into the unknown. Would she forsake the decades of stoicism she had built her life around? Could she truly let this boy in to shatter her fortress of solitude? Conflict churned painfully inside her, each thought a grain of sand creeping into a wound she didn't want to heal. With every painted stroke, they transformed the forgotten rooms of her estate into realms of color, each hue revealing secrets long buried. Yet as she embraced this newfound friendship, the weight of her past lay in wait, coiling tight around her heart. Eleanor's breath quickened, her mind racing with uncertainty. What would her world unravel into if her secret was exposed before her peers? The truth that she, too, was merely an outsider, longing for connection. As the colors danced before her eyes, Eleanor took a breath, but it felt shallow, panic creeping into her chest. Could she really embrace this chance at creating, at feeling again, when she was teetering at the brink of judgment? Tonight, as the opening of her art exhibit approached, she prepared to face not just the audience but herself. Would the applause fill her with pride, or would it serve to drown her in silence all over again? The echoes of doubt rendered her still, leaving Eleanor on the edge of hope and fear, caught in a spiral that intensified with every heartbeat. Eleanor stood before her mirror, tracing the lines etched on her face, each one a chapter of her history. In her mind, art had always been a passionate friend, one she had neglected in favor of resignation. Now, under the scrutiny of her own reflection, she realized that every brushstroke Alex had initiated in her art studio was an act of rebellion against the silence that consumed her. The evening was drawing nigh, and she could feel the energy building in anticipation. Tonight was not just about unveiling her art. It was a spectre of her past, colliding with her present. Eleanor let her fingers glide across an untouched canvas leaning against the wall, a blank slate that mirrored her uncertainty. Could she fill it? The idea gnawed at her. Could this night catalyze a change in her life? Or would the applause, should it arrive, be a hollow echo in her heart? As she prepared, choosing a deep shade of blue that reminded her of the ocean where she and her husband had spent so many summers, her thoughts invariably drifted back to Alex. His fearlessness was astonishing. How could a 12-year-old wield such ambition and creativity without the weight of societal expectations stifling him? She had watched him paint, the way his small hands manipulated colors with genuine emotion, each blend resonating with a vitality she had all but abandoned. Hastily, Eleanor set to work, the familiar scent of turpentine enveloping her as she pulled her brushes from the drawer. As colors collided under her fingers, she could hear Alex's laughter in her mind, a buoyant melody that broke the heavy silence of her life. Could this boy inspire her not only to create, but to step away from the shadows that had long since claimed her? In a frenzy of passion, she painted until the setting sun cast a warm glow through the windows. The interplay of light and color danced in the room, illuminating the fragments of her spirit she had buried deep. For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt an inkling of hope rising within her. Maybe she could make art again, not just for herself, but as an offering to the world, an exploration of the visions in her heart. The knock on the door startled her. Maria entered, followed by Alex, whose excitement radiated in the small space. They were ready to support her that evening, and the pride swelling inside Eleanor was foreign yet invigorating. It struck her then. The connections they formed could shatter not only her isolation, but also challenge the confines of doubt she had wrapped around herself for years. "What do you think?" she asked, a hesitant smile emerging as she revealed her freshly painted canvas. Alex's eyes widened, sparkling with genuine awe. "It's amazing! You should show everyone," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm infectious. As unauthentic aspects of herself melted away, Eleanor felt a shift. The judgment she felt looming began to fade, as she realized that art was not a measure of worth based on approval, but a way to communicate what lay within her soul. As the time ticked closer to the exhibit's opening, she faced a crucial decision. Would she share this painting, this piece of her newfound freedom, revealing her vulnerability to an audience she had shunned for so long? "You have to," Alex urged, misinterpreting her hesitation. "You have to show them the real you." A warmth surged through Eleanor, igniting a spark of courage she thought lost forever. She understood then. It was time to stop hiding, to face the discomfort. If Alex could risk himself, was it not her own turning point to take risk as well? As they arrived at the gallery, the air thick with anticipation, Eleanor clenched her brush tightly, preparing for the moment of truth, not just about her art, but about herself. The crowd buzzed with expectation, and for the first time, Eleanor felt a strange thrill coursing through her veins. The moment had come to reclaim her voice. Would she rise or fall in this vulnerable confrontation? As she stood on the precipice, Eleanor realized her journey was only beginning, where friendship and the courage to create intertwined tightly. What awaited her on the other side of that curtain? Eleanor took a deep breath, the scent of fresh paint still lingering in the air. The gallery buzzed around her, an orchestra of nervous chatter and hushed whispers, alive with the stories and aspirations of those who had put themselves forward for judgment, just as she had. The moment morphed into an overwhelming cyclone of emotions: excitement, dread, hope, and a touch of nostalgia, woven into every fiber of her being. Each heartbeat drummed the idea into her mind. This could be a rebirth, or a bitter reminder of the silence she had lived within for far too long. As she approached the curtain that separated her from the audience, Eleanor felt a flush of vulnerability sweep over her. In that split second, she considered retreating. A part of her longed for the safety of obscurity. What if no one cared? What if they found her work wanting? Doubt, long silenced by her recent resolve, now glimmered like a spectre taunting her. Yet, just as quickly, a determination settled in its place. She turned to the canvas once more, allowing herself to observe the bold blue strokes cascading into waves, the way light shimmered upon it, as if it were alive. It was a fragment of her heart, a reflection of the beauty and turmoil intertwined in her existence. The realization hit her, profound and dawning. Art had never failed to comfort her. It simply awaited her return. It was not about the approval of others, but about reclaiming her narrative and sharing a piece of her soul. With her hand brushing against her latest creation, she felt Alex's encouraging presence beside her. His eyes sparkled with admiration and anticipation. His unwavering belief in her abilities, raw and unfiltered, ignited her spirit. "You inspire me," he had said so many times, and she was learning to see that inspiration reflected in herself as well. His youthful fearlessness reminded her of the passion she had lost along the way. A sudden calm washed over Eleanor, grounding her anxiety. She was not just an artist, but a storyteller, pouring unspoken words into colors that could conjure emotions, memories, and hope. This could be her moment to release decades of silence and reclaim the power of expression that came naturally in youth, but had been silenced over the years by self-judgment and fear. With a gentle nudge, Alex urged her forward. Eleanor stepped toward the curtain, her heart pounding in rhythm with her tremors of anticipation. She felt the audience's energy radiate around her, a collective breath held in expectation. With a steadying hand, Eleanor grasped the fabric and drew the curtain back. Brightness spilled into her space as she stepped from behind, revealing herself and her canvas to the crowd. Gasps of surprise and delight echoed in the gallery. In that instant, the world felt expansive and open. She met their eyes, reading the curiosity and engagement on their faces. It was new. It was exhilarating. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice wavering slightly, laced with both trepidation and resolve. "I've spent years in silence, but tonight I want to share with you this piece that speaks to my journey back to myself." As she spoke, Eleanor felt her walls crumbling. She explained the colors, the emotions attached to them, the sea like her memories, deep and swirling. Her words flowed freely, unburdening the weight of her past, inviting her audience into her world, her rediscovered joy. The connection she forged through her art felt profound, bridging gaps she had believed engineered by her self-imposed isolation. The reaction from the crowd was stirring. The applause felt deliciously intoxicating, not the hollow echoes of her fears, but the validation of her existence and intention. She could see that they didn't just see her painting, they felt it. Eleanor was struck by the realization that she truly belonged to the fabric of creative expression once more. As the evening wore on, Eleanor found herself surrounded by intrigued faces, eager to know more about the woman behind the art. Conversations flowed, warmth enveloping her, but a deeper question lingered within her mind. Could this newfound courage extend beyond the strokes of a brush? Was the artistic dialogue she had resumed a bridge to reclaiming other parts of her life she had abandoned? The gallery began to empty, but Eleanor's heart pulsed with newfound purpose. The experiment of unveiling her soul was only just beginning. What other revelations awaited her as she embraced this unfamiliar territory focused on connection and vulnerability? The questions tumbled forth. Was it possible she could reconnect with other aspects of life she had neglected? If art could illuminate her path, what more could she discover about herself waiting on the horizon? Eleanor stood amidst the faint echoes of enthusiasm, her heart dancing with accolades, but her mind flooded with shadows of uncertainty. The gallery lights softened, yet her thoughts raced with the urgency of a new beginning. As the last guests departed, she felt a tinge of elation intertwined with an insistent nag of introspection. Was this merely the culmination of a one-time experience, or was it a preamble to something more profound? Alex remained beside her, animatedly discussing the event's highlights, but Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that her breakthrough transcended the confines of the gallery. Could this newfound courage to express herself extend into the daily landscape of her life? The warmth that filled her during those conversations with strangers had unveiled layers she had long buried beneath the dust of silence. "Eleanor," Alex's voice cut through her reverie, snapping her back to focus. "You were brilliant. Did you see their faces? I can't help but wonder if it can last," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Deep down, she feared the inevitable return to her previous quietude. The thrill of sharing her artistry left her buzzing, yet the spectre of doubt loomed larger than ever. What would happen when the applause faded? Would she revert to feeling ephemeral, flickering at the edges of existence? "Of course it can last. You have to push yourself beyond tonight." "This is only the beginning," he urged, enthusiasm lighting his eyes. "Do you have more pieces ready? Maybe you can have a series or a workshop. You could really connect with people, share your journey." The suggestion ignited a spark of curiosity within her. Could hosting a workshop enable her to not just express herself, but form genuine connections with others seeking their own voices? The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. What if the venture sparked a community of creators where vulnerability was celebrated and personal narratives flourished? Eleanor breathed deeply again, contemplating the newfound idea. I've only ever created for myself, Alex. It's been so personal." But, as the words tumbled out, she could see the potential. What if sharing this process could help someone else feel less alone? "Exactly. People crave that authenticity," he said, his conviction radiating. "Your art speaks volumes. Imagine if sharing that could lead someone to rediscover their own passion." The vision began to take shape in her mind, a kaleidoscope of possibilities intertwining with fear and hope. The memory of standing before the audience, hand trembling on the curtain, crossed her thoughts, a reminder of how vulnerability had led her here. The workshop dream solidified her newfound commitment to herself. Yet as she planned this new venture in the forge of her imagination, another thought pressed against her consciousness: the risk of failure. What if no one showed up? What if she poured her heart into these sessions only to hear crickets echoing back? The voices of self-doubt crept up again, insidiously questioning her motivations, just as they had for years. But Eleanor clutched onto the burgeoning conviction ignited by the evening's reception. Perhaps it was time to confront those fears directly, to challenge the narratives that anchored her down. She could disempower the doubts by engaging with them. "What if I fail?" she finally asked, allowing the vulnerability of her concern to surface. "I think it's more important to ask, what if you succeed?" Alex replied, his smile illuminating the temptation to embrace her fears rather than evade them. Eleanor's gaze wandered to her painting, its vibrant hues reminiscent of the tumultuous journey she had embarked upon. This was her moment for growth, a fresh chapter written in strokes of uncertainty and possibility. As the lights dimmed further in the gallery, Eleanor's heart pulsed with anticipation. She felt poised on the edge of something significant. She envisioned herself facilitating discussions, guiding others through their creative vein while battling her own fears aloud. The idea settled within her. A workshop was not just an opportunity to teach, but a means to expand her emotional landscape, eradicating the last remnants of self-imposed isolation. Determined, stance firm, Eleanor declared, "I'll do it. I'll start the workshop." As she spoke the words, a tremor of resolve swept through her. It was not a question anymore, but a chosen path. But as she contemplated how to structure these workshops and build a community, a more pressing question emerged. Would the vulnerability required to facilitate others' journeys force her to confront her own unhealed wounds? The gallery, now shrouded in silence, echoed her internal conflict as Eleanor realized the interplay between leading others and leading herself was only beginning. What depths of her past would she need to uncover? What ghosts would she face along this new journey? She paused, feeling the weight of the challenge and the thrill that accompanied it. The moment of exploration had arrived. It was time not only to share her art, but her truth. As the final lights flickered off, a singular thought ignited within her. Where would this exploration of vulnerability lead her? Eleanor awoke the next morning with a peculiar blend of eagerness and dread wound tightly in her chest. Sunlight spilled through her window, illuminating the remnants of the night. An untouched canvas and scattered sketches lay as silent witnesses to her dreams, or perhaps her nightmares. Today, she would embark on her first workshop, a delicate balance between vulnerability and authority. As she sipped her coffee, Eleanor replayed the conversations from the previous night. Alex's encouragement echoed in her mind, stoking a fire of determination that danced dangerously close to self-doubt. What if she stumbled? What if the participants were unequipped to handle her candidness, or worse, what if they merely stared blankly, unimpressed? The canvas seemed to mock her stillness, colors splattered without direction. In desperation, Eleanor picked up her brush, and with each stroke she embraced the uncertainty swirling in her mind. The vibrant hues morphed into shapes, a reflection of her jammed thoughts and indecisive emotions. It was a physical manifestation of her inner chaos. She sighed, allowing the brush to slip from her fingers as it clattered onto the table. The workshop was not merely an opportunity to share her artistic journey, it was a chance to pry open the door to her own long-suppressed fears. Would she find the courage to face the ghosts lurking in her past? Deep breath, Eleanor, one step at a time. As the clock ticked closer to the workshop's start, Eleanor transformed the small studio into a welcoming space. Chairs arranged in a loose circle, art supplies neatly set aside for the participants. She wanted them to feel ease rather than anxiety. Yet beneath that, she struggled with her aching apprehension. Controlling her own fear while guiding others felt like trying to balance on a tightrope strung over a deep chasm. Each wobble could provoke a slide into self-doubt. It felt as risky as laying bare her heart. When those first hesitant souls entered, leaning awkwardly against the walls and each other, Eleanor felt the rush of adrenaline. She greeted them with an attempted warmth, a friendly smile tacked onto a facade of composure. But as she studied their faces, Eleanor marked the same apprehension mirrored in their eyes. "Welcome," she started, her voice a steady foundation she sought to emulate. "I'm Eleanor. This isn't just a workshop. It's a space for us to explore together, to share our stories, and to create from a place of authenticity." The tension in the air thickened, and for a moment Eleanor sensed the smiles fading as vulnerability took root. The realization struck her hard. This was not just about her art, but about becoming a vessel of unearthing truths for herself and others. As she facilitated the opening discussion, she guided the participants through a warm-up exercise, inviting them to share what art meant to them. Each revelation diffused a fraction of the discomfort. They were all willing to forge their own paths, much like Eleanor was attempting to do, but as they articulated their fears of not being good enough or their pasts that had silenced them, she couldn't help but think of her own buried stories. "Why not draw inspiration from our pain?" she suggested, her heart racing with the resolve of someone standing on the edge of a precipice. "What if we painted our struggles, our fears, on our canvases?" She was startled by the nods around the circle, complete strangers, now finding commonality in the shadows of their experiences. As they began to create, Eleanor felt her walls start to dissolve. Every brushstroke echoed unvoiced emotions. Every smear of paint became a badge of their collective journey. Yet in the back of her mind, Eleanor questioned whether they would also shed light on her shadows. Was she prepared to dive into her turmoil, to expose the scars she had tried to forget? As colours bloomed on canvas, the fear of shedding her own layers nagged at her courage. As they worked, Eleanor was gradually swept away by the momentum of shared vulnerability, a moment of connection she hadn't anticipated. She dared to glance at her piece, where raw emotions collided in bold strokes, an unfiltered reflection staring back at her. The room buzzed with newfound energy, yet the looming spectre of unexamined pain loitered around her heart. Would she share her truth alongside theirs? She felt a storm of conflicting choices brewing within. Would she risk exposing herself as the very person she sought to engage? As her participants shared stories that mirrored her own, Eleanor realized there lay a threshold she had to breach, the transition from guiding to sharing her own narrative. Was she ready to step into that vulnerability? What choices remained as she balanced between teacher and student, leader and follower of her own narrative? The workshop had ignited a transformation within her, but the real journey awaited beyond that canvas. With newfound momentum, her heart raced as she considered the forthcoming challenge. What if sharing her story propelled them all into a deeper understanding of themselves? Resilience and fear clashed with each brushstroke of her thoughts, leaving her breathless as she pondered. Would revealing her scars not only liberate her, but also forge a bond that could unveil even more profound connections? The stakes felt impossibly high, yet the glow of potential filled the air. As they wrapped up the session, Eleanor understood the first invitation had just been extended. Now, the question remained. What depths had they yet to explore, and how far would she be willing to go to uncover her authentic self? Eleanor's heart pounded, each beat echoing the uncertainty she felt about stepping into deeper waters. As soon as the workshop ended, a mix of exhilaration and fear washed over her. They had painted their pain, but the real challenge loomed ahead. Hers remained hidden, waiting to be unveiled. She watched her participants gather their creations, vibrant and marked by raw honesty. Yet the singular thought that clawed at her was the fear of obsolescence, that their experiences might overshadow her own. As they walked toward the door, Eleanor hesitated. "Thank you all for sharing today. Remember, creating is a journey," she offered. But as the last goodbye slipped from her lips, the weight of unsaid words lingered in the air. Alone in the studio, she glanced at her canvas, which now stood as a monument to shared fears and aspirations. Thoughts churned like a storm. Did she even know how to articulate her own story? What if the paint on her brush couldn't convey the shadows of her past? With a deep breath, she opened her sketchbook. The blank pages mirrored her apprehension. What if solitude became her anchor? Wouldn't it be easier to retreat behind the safety of anonymity rather than explore the angst swirling within? She shook her head, dismissing the notion, but nevertheless the temptation loomed. The thrill of vulnerability brewed a dual impulse. Part of her yearned to break through the facade she had constructed, while the other recoiled at the thought of judgment. The day's session had demonstrated the power of connection, yet Eleanor grappled with the stark reality of her own guardedness. If she revealed too much, would they still respect her? Would they still see her as the guide, or merely as another lost wanderer? Determined to confront her fears, Eleanor found herself back at the studio mere hours later. The silence enveloped her, offering a refuge for reflection. She spread her art supplies across the table once more. What if she visualized her narrative? Could visual art articulate emotions her voice could not? This method emerged as a silent revelation, a moment sparked by a craving for expression without the confines of verbal language. With each brushstroke, Eleanor sought to weave her memories onto the canvas, allowing vulnerability to pour from her heart. The fear of revisiting her past whispered, warning her of the pain entangled within. Yet, as she painted, the familiar sensations uncoiled, an inner resilience battling the chaos. She painted her childhood, the vibrant chaos of laughter, masking the tension at home, the moments of solace found in fleeting sunsets, and the whispers of inadequacy that had crept steadily into her life like an unwelcome shadow. It unfurled across the canvas, a patchwork of colors from joy to sorrow, all tangled together. Soon, what started as a smudge transformed into a swirling storm, each hue representing battles fought silently. In the act of creating, she confronted the unacknowledged scars, bravely capturing the vulnerability she had avoided for so long. This time, the act felt not like a betrayal, but a reclamation. The release brought clarity. Perhaps instead of hiding behind the canvas, she could stand before it, not just as a teacher, but as a fellow artist navigating the undeniably complex maze of existence. The question now remained, would she share this creation with her participants in the next session, bearing not just her artistic soul, but the fragments of her story? Would this act of openness inspire others to defy their reservations? Eleanor set her brush down. The day's weight shifted, slowly illuminating her potential. As she stared at the canvas, a thought flickered. What if the connection she craved could be forged through shared truths rather than polished exteriors? With a surge of determination fueling her spirit, she knew she had to deepen this exploration. The stakes had grown higher. Opening her wounds could either draw them closer or tear them apart. But for every moment spent in trepidation, a whisper of courage echoed back. This journey was about more than art. It was about forging a path to an authentic self. What awaited her on the other side of that revelation? Eleanor had to find out. Eleanor spent the night restlessly watching shadows dance across her studio walls, fragments of her unfinished canvas haunting her thoughts. Each stroke she dared to make echoed back her uncertainty. The looming session with her participants weighed heavily on her. Sharing her piece felt monumental, as if standing naked before the world. The following morning, she stepped into the studio, apprehension trailing behind her like a spectre. She glanced at her painting, the colors merging and fading. Were they reflective of her own unseen scars? With fresh canvas staring back at her, a newfound resolve started to build. This was not simply about art, it was about fostering a dialogue. That day, Eleanor focused on the act of painting. Each brushstroke served as a catharsis, drawing her deeper into introspection. She allowed herself moments of stillness, contemplating how to convey her narrative without becoming overwhelmed by fear. Could she craft her story, not from her achievements, but rather from her vulnerabilities? It was a radical thought, so foreign to her previous modus operandi. Her identity as a teacher had always been about imparting wisdom, but maybe, just maybe, she could lead by example too. Eleanor stood before her canvas, letting the brush glide across the surface, exploring the harmony between color and emotion. Through this process, she unearthed memories that resurfaced, prompting questions about her past. How had the dramas of her youth shaped the woman she had become? What could she offer that was authentic and could resonate with her participants' experiences? The vibrant chaos of childhood memories transformed into motifs. Swirls of color illustrated the tension of family expectations and the solace found within quiet moments. This piece was evolving into more than just reflection. It was becoming a parallel to the struggles of her participants, the raw, untarnished truth of their collective journeys. Each stroke felt like a healing, a reclamation of years lost behind a mask of professionalism. But a flicker of doubt crept in. Would her vulnerability be met with understanding or with judgment? The voices of her past taunted her again, warning of the consequences of exposing oneself too much. Yet each word of doubt was challenged by the surging dreams she had long silenced, the desire to connect, to seek authentic relationships, to be more than a mere observer in her own life. As she prepared for the session, she made a decision. She would share not only her art, but the emotion behind it. The invitation to challenge herself was both terrifying and exhilarating. What if empathy emerged from the act of unveiling those buried pieces of herself? Maybe they wouldn't see her as just a guide. Perhaps they'd recognize her as a fellow wanderer in the wilderness of vulnerability. Eleanor set up her studio. Brushes, paints, and the haze of intent filled the air, but beneath that excitement was the palpable tension of possibility. Would her participants respond with openness, or would they recoil from her authenticity? The stakes had never felt higher. As her participants arrived, the air crackled with anticipation. An undercurrent of shared nerves thrummed around the room. She caught their eyes, and in that moment, something shifted. This session wouldn't merely be a class. It was an opportunity to forge connections grounded in truth. Yet as she prepared to unveil her narrative, an unexpected voice from the back interrupted. What happens if we see more than we want to? The question hung like a thick fog in the studio, veiling the clarity Eleanor had fought to achieve. Caught off guard, Eleanor's heart raced. The genuine query stirred something deeper within her, a visceral realization of the potential for both understanding and misunderstanding. What would unfold now? Would she muster the courage to confront not only their curiosity, but also her own insecurities? The journey into vulnerability had only just begun. Eleanor felt the weight of the question settling in her chest, a ball of anxiety that twisted and turned as she considered her next words. The studio seemed to breathe with her, an entity alive with expectation. She realized that the vulnerability she sought to share was not a solitary journey. It was a vessel carrying a shared fear that pulsed through the room. "That's a valid concern," she finally responded, her voice steadier than she felt. "We often guard ourselves from what lies beneath the surface, but sometimes facing those shadows can lead to unexpected growth." The participants exchanged glances, the initial spark of unease blurring into curiosity. Eleanor could sense the shift, a palpable energy that encouraged her to weave a deeper narrative. She decided to share a brief story of her own struggles, a featherlight revelation about a moment in her past when she'd been paralyzed by fear, afraid to share the truth of her struggles with even the people closest to her. As she spoke, she noticed the furrowed brows of her audience easing, reflections of their inner turmoil beginning to surface as she opened the floodgates of her experience. The tension in the room began to morph into something more constructive, an undercurrent of shared histories quietly unraveling. Eleanor's heart raced as she unveiled her vulnerabilities. "When I first started painting, I was overwhelmed by what I thought I should create, rather than exploring what I felt. The paintings I hid were those that spoke most profoundly to my experience." She gestured toward her canvas. "Each stroke was more than just technique. It was a conversation with my past and a bridge to my present." A tentative silence followed her words. Several participants shifted in their seats, eyes glimmering with understanding, and a spark of empathy ignited in the air. What had threatened to choke her emotions now became her greatest source of strength. "Maybe it's not just about what we want to show, but what we're ready to face together," she urged, allowing her gaze to settle upon the speaker who'd voiced doubt earlier. "What if we embrace seeing more, and even discuss what that means for us?" To her surprise, the participant who had questioned her raised a hand. "What if the truth is too much? What if we can't handle it?" Eleanor took a breath, her chest tightening. This was where it mattered most. Could she navigate that fear alongside them? Sometimes we find strength together. Even if the truth feels heavy, sharing that burden makes it lighter. We're walking this path together. What started as a simple art class had evolved into something terrifying yet exhilarating, an atmosphere brimming with possibility. As participants began to share their own stories, Eleanor felt an undeniable connection form among them, as if the vulnerable pieces of their lives were weaving a tapestry rich with resilience. Eleanor's pulse quickened as she realized the potential for personal growth hadn't just blossomed within her, it was igniting around her, a flickering light guiding each individual toward a deeper understanding of themselves. In each shared story, she found threads of unity, healing, and the promise of collective transformation. As the session wound down and the participants began to reflect upon their commitments to both their art and their personal journeys, Eleanor felt emboldened. They were sharing not just stories, but parts of their souls. Each revelation was a stepping stone, leading them toward profound realizations of self-acceptance. But even with the breakthroughs, a lingering doubt swirled in Eleanor's mind. Could she maintain this momentum? Would she have the strength to guide them through the tougher parts of their journey? As the last participant departed, the quiet of the studio felt palpable. Eleanor sat alone, surrounded by her canvases and the tender echoes of their conversations, grappling with the ever-looming question: what would happen when the joyous revelations began to confront the darker realities lurking beneath? Her eyes drifted to her unfinished canvas. The colors still awaited her direction. The moment of truth was dawning, but she wasn't ready to face it alone. What if the next session shattered the very progress they had made? Would she be able to hold together everything they'd built? The journey into vulnerability was far from over. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of the studio, illuminating the scattered paints and brushes that had come to embody Eleanor's ongoing journey. A faint buzz of anxiety still lingered in her mind, punctuating her thoughts with questions as she prepared for the next session. How could she ensure that the space remained safe while challenging her participants to explore their limits? Eleanor set to work on her canvas, hoping that each stroke would anchor her thoughts and quell the restlessness within. She considered the raw emotions they had shared the previous day, the stories that had emerged like fragile seedlings beneath the warmth of vulnerability. Each story had rekindled a flicker of courage she had largely kept buried. But how long could they build upon this newfound courage before the inevitable shadows of doubt re-emerged? The clock ticked away, the minutes blurring together as she wrestled with her doubts, but she buried them under layers of paint. Soon enough, the participants trickled in, bringing with them an energy that contrasted against the aching silence she had just endured. As they settled into their spaces, Eleanor felt the weight of anticipation creeping in again. Today, she had to open the floor, providing room for deeper exploration of the fears they had just begun to touch. "Today, I'd like us to challenge ourselves," she began, her voice steadier than it felt, "to confront the things we usually keep hidden, the ideas that make us anxious or afraid." She watched as a mixture of apprehension and excitement flickered across their faces. Some exchanged hesitant glances, while others simply nodded, acknowledging the leap into the unknown. This was the delicate balance, a coaxing out of deeper fears while holding on to the fragile trust they'd built. With each painting session, Eleanor gently nudged them to dig deeper, prompting them to visualize the shadows they feared facing. "What does your fear look like?" she asked, moving among the canvases, peering into the souls of each participant. One young woman, her voice barely a whisper, responded, "It feels like a wall, strong and impassable." She pointed to her canvas, where the lines and shapes were stark and hard. Eleanor felt a pang of recognition in this expression, for her own fear had often felt like an impenetrable barrier. "What if we considered the wall as a part of us instead of a barrier?" she suggested. What if we painted it, acknowledged it, embraced it? The discussion spiraled into a powerful exploration of fear's form, each participant drawing and painting the shadows they had lived with. Eleanor's heart swelled and ached simultaneously. She witnessed them confronting what had held them captive for so long. Yet a part of her still wrestled with a gnawing question: were they ready for the next step? Moments later, Eleanor stepped back to absorb their progress. The studio hummed with creativity, yet the realization struck her that her position as a guide was fragile. What if their artworks reflected something darker, something she felt ill-equipped to embrace? Could she really support them through it when her own comfort teetered on the brink? Faced with her own uneasiness, Eleanor knew she must confront her fear of inadequacy before it overshadowed the breakthroughs in the room. Reflecting on the trusting relationship that had begun to flourish, she breathed deeply, reminding herself of the strength found in vulnerability. Just as she was about to share her thoughts, a participant hesitated, hand raised in uncertainty. Eleanor felt her breath catch. What if this exposure backfires? What if we can't handle where this leads? The air thickened with tension. This was the crux of the matter, the moment that would determine if they could navigate the treacherous waters ahead. Eleanor had to decide. Could she guide others through unexplored depths while grappling with her own sinking fears? "Let's engage with that question," she finally offered, her voice firm yet laced with uncertainty. But could she truly be the anchor when the storm began to swell? As the discussion blossomed, Eleanor realized she stood at the threshold of transformative change. Little did she know, the very next brushstroke could lead them all to a place of honesty, one they might not be ready to navigate. Eleanor Devlin had completed her transformation, stepping out as a fully realized artist and an authentic voice, a fusion of her identity as a creator and a mentor. The shadow of doubt that had long haunted her had started to dissipate as they ventured through vulnerability together. Her participants returned, carrying their fears on their canvases like badges of honor, each brushstroke marking a step toward owning their shadows. As Eleanor navigated the next session, she felt a surge of determination igniting her spirit. She was not just an instructor anymore. She was a guide, leading her companions through tumultuous waters toward the shores of authenticity. With the air thick with creative energy, Eleanor invited the room to come together for one final act of catharsis. Each person would share their fears openly. As she observed the hesitance surrounding the room, she opened the floor with her own revelation. Standing before them with certainty, she revealed her own canvas, showcasing the swirling colors representing her childhood struggles, a visual testimony to her journey of rediscovery. As she poured her heart into the explanation, a weight lifted. No longer just an observer in life, Eleanor had inhabited a new role. Her art had become a vehicle for conversation and connection, binding them closer through shared narratives. The applause that followed was not merely for her painting, it was recognition of their collective bravery. It became evident to Eleanor that sharing her truth inspired others, unleashing an array of emotions in the room. One participant's trembling voice ignited the flames of courage in others, revealing stories of unspoken fears and triumphs that had long fled under the weight of silence. Each story woven into the fabric of their space strengthened the network of support blossoming among them. As each participant joined in, Eleanor found herself enveloped in a tapestry of diversity. The human experience unfolded intimately and organically, punctuated by laughter, tears, and gasps of recognition. Together, they cultivated an atmosphere rich with empathy, where acknowledgement transformed pain into shared strength. In that pivotal moment, Eleanor's heart swelled with pride. She had facilitated this shared expression, a groundbreaking achievement that transcended her expectations. She was no longer the lonely heiress plastered with labels. Here, They formed a vibrant community, engaged in addressing personal struggles and inspiring collective growth. Eleanor felt the gentle pull of recognition beckoning her. She was no longer a mere ghost, haunting her own life, but an integral force of encouragement and creativity. The connections forged in that room had furthered her sense of belonging. She had not only conquered her fears, but also paved avenues for others to do the same. The promise of transformation lay outwardly reflected as she witnessed her participants embrace their individuality. The session culminated in an unexpected burst of spontaneous expression. They each decided to publicly exhibit their personal connections in a local cafe, showcasing their artworks alongside the courageous narratives that fueled them. Eleanor volunteered to host, recognizing that her long-held ambitions could finally align with her life's new direction. What once seemed insurmountable now blossomed before Eleanor as opportunity intertwined with purpose. She stood at the precipice of not just revitalizing her art career, but reshaping her entire narrative. A new chapter loomed large. Beyond art workshops, Eleanor could lead retreats focused on creative empowerment and foster communities for individuals seeking the voice she had finally found. As the cafe event neared, Eleanor felt a renewed sense of confidence surge within her. She understood that her role was never meant to shield her from the world, but to bridge the connective tissue among those in search of authenticity. Her laughter, genuine joy and genuine presence attracted others yearning for authenticity. Both fear and excitement flowed through her as she stood before the crowd on the opening night. Surrounded by joyful faces eager to share their stories, Eleanor welcomed the realization that each connection made stemmed from courage and vulnerability, the very essence of life itself. With the wind of transformations at her back, Eleanor embraced this newfound purpose recognized in everyone's eyes, a life lived boldly in art, authenticity, and connection. The gentle quiver of doubt no longer had a hold over her. Instead, success poured into her heart, resonating a melody of fulfillment that lingered long after the applause faded. This was the moment she had fought for, the achievement she deserved. Her commitment to vulnerability transformed into a beacon of hope, radiating the belief that art was not just for the gifted, but for everyone yearning to express. As she stepped into the waves of recognition, the ghosts of her past faded, no longer haunting her, but propelling her to soar. Now, more than ever, she was ready to face whatever awaited on the horizon, secure in the knowledge that she had transformed not only herself, but also the lives of those who gathered courage from her journey. To everyone witnessing this incredible metamorphosis, Eleanor knew she had finally conquered her past. Each brushstroke echoed the core tenet of her realization. The only way forward was through connection, creativity, and courage. Join her on this extraordinary journey. Don't miss out on more emotional and transformative stories. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support this storytelling. Comment your reactions and theories about Eleanor's incredible journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.